All right, welcome everyone. This is the first of a series of interviews where we take some time and interview a couple of the most knowledgeable and experienced industry experts. I know, just roll with me on this, David, and get your opinions on the past year and what 2024 might hold, and really put the shoe on the other foot and kind of ask them some questions. My name's Sean Luchins. I'm the GM of Total Rewards at Visier. And I'm new to this, if you can't tell, but I'm really excited to talk to some of these industry experts. And to kick this off, we have one of the best. We're lucky enough to have David Turetsky from HR Data Labs podcast. Welcome. Do you like that intro?
It's actually really good. You did a great job, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. So can you give us a little history of your background? Kind of run through your background, because I think it's one of the most interesting backgrounds. And I say that being serious, because it covers kind of, as people will see, a wide range.
Thank you. So I went to college to be an architect, and then 7 weeks into the program failed. And so I carried 6 credits of F throughout my entire college career. And what happened was I stumbled into economics. And my first economics course, the teacher came up to me afterwards and he said, "Oh, so you're an economics major?" And I said, "No, I have no major." And he said, "Well, you're an economics major." And because I just loved trying to understand how people act and react to stimuli, whether it's economic stimuli from getting a paycheck or whether it was just listening to the environment around them. And so I used that background, and my first job was at Towers Perrin, Foster and Crosby, the old TPF&C. And my first job was modeling compensation programs using, we were using mean frame focus to regress how people got paid based on their skills, knowledge, and abilities. And so that kind of led into this love affair of compensation and human resources, and being able to help managers see HR as a business decision, not as a HR decision, right? And making compensation decisions that were best for the company and the employee. And so I wound my way through being a practitioner, being a consultant, and my last job was having Turetsky Consulting before I came to salary.com, where now I'm the CHRO and VP of consulting. That's new news, Sean. That happened yesterday.
Huh?
So now I'm doing fractional CHRO, plus I'm doing my day job of helping companies solve their big problems by consulting with them.
It's kind of cool. You get to talk the talk and then kind of have to go walk the walk, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. I have to take my own medicine.
Yeah. You don't want to tell everyone you guys should all do this, but I'm not going to in my day job.
Exactly. And along the way, I get to podcast with brilliant people like Sean and be able to help uncover how some of the most brilliant minds inside and outside the world of HR are actually dealing with this crazy, complex world that we live in today. And I've been doing that since 2020, and that's just so much fun.
It is interesting. Before we get to some other questions, I joke and tell people all the time, I've been around a while, but I've never been a practitioner. And that's because that looks hard. I love helping them solve problems, but that looks ridiculously hard, being a practitioner and taking all this theory and putting it into practice. And I think I've heard you say it on your podcast before too, and I try to use the same thing. It's hard to predict everything because it's got humans involved, which are unpredictable, and everything's personal. Even you can't unpersonalize something that personal.
No, you're actually very true. I mean, it's so hard. You can say all you want about best practices. We hate that word, right? Best practices. But when you actually put them into practice and you see what it actually does to people's lives, you then kind of step back and you go, "Whoa, wow! I've been saying this, or I've been consulting that." Yep. And so, having been a practitioner, it's actually gives you a really good. It's like a cold glass of water in the face sometimes. You may not want to consult about that next time because you saw how it happened. So it's definitely a wake-up call.
So before we get going, a little bit of what you do, usually ask something different about folks, but I actually ask this of everybody during interviews and even when I have intro calls at where I work or whatever. But what do you do for fun outside of work as a normal human?
What is there an outside of work? Oh no. So I've been writing books. The HR Data Doodles book. I'm in series 2 right now. Series 3 is in production, and series 4 got written. So writing books, basically very thought leadership based, about all the things we talk about and all these issues, these complex issues, and just making them fun and making them making people laugh, reading a page, flipping to the next page and going, which character is going to make me laugh this time? And then also I coach my son's hockey team. It's a Pee-wee hockey team, under 12, 12 and under. And that's 4 times on the ice a week. Plus I skate guard on weekends. So I help people learn how to skate, and I try and keep them safe.
Okay. That's awesome. It's funny. I like to do a lot of stuff. I might possibly be the world's worst ice skater. I'm
That's
awful.
not true.
my brain, like, I told people I had to stop figure skating when we moved, ice skating,
Yep.
when we moved to Vermont, when the kids got good enough to get off the crate, because that meant I had to get off the crate.
Yeah.
So that was the end of my career. So the fact that you're out
Bad for your
skateboarding
back.
and spending that much time.
Hey, you know what? The people say all the time that they don't know how to skate, and then someone kind of triggers something in their brain. They tell them something like bend your knees, learn how to balance, don't do this. And then all of a sudden it just comes to them, and it's kind of like, riding a bike. There's someone who can connect the dots for you and be able to help you see, ooh, if I did this one thing differently, I'll feel more comfortable. And the problem with skating is when you have doubt, when you're discomfort on those skates, you're going to fall. When you balance and you feel like you're in balance and you don't think about it anymore, that's when you don't fall. Unless somebody...
It's kind of like an analogy for life, I think.
Yes, it is true.
It's very deep. So how'd you get into the podcasting piece with all the career that was there and everything else? How'd you get started into that space?
That's a great question. So when I was in Turetsky Consulting and we were blogging, we were doing a lot of LinkedIn, publishing, we found that nobody was listening. Nobody was watching. Nobody cared. And so what we tried to do is we tried to meet people where they wanted to be, which is some like the medium of reading, some like the medium of listening. And podcasting was growing tremendously during the pandemic. And so we, said, let's try this. And one of the fascinating things about podcasting is that if you're successful, that means you've gotten past like 10 episodes or 20 episodes. Well, no one told us that. And so he just kept going and going and going. So we started October 1st, 2020. And then along the way, we gathered an audience and things started to happen and people started listening, people started reacting. And now we've achieved 150 episodes. And there's a website called, I think, Listen Notes. And if you look at Listen Notes, it tells you what your rank is amongst 3 million podcasts. And we're in the top 10th percentile. I mean, we're not talking Joe Rogan numbers here. We were like shocked. Holy crap, we're 10th percentile? That's pretty amazing. And one of the things is longevity. Being able to be podcasting for 3 years is kind of amazing.
Yep.
But along the way, we've had lots of really wonderful conversations. And what keeps us going is the listeners, as well as people now saying, hey, I want to be on your podcast, which is kind of cool.
That makes it easier.
It
So
does.
as we spin that around, kind of if you aggregate all of the, your thoughts, obviously, and then those of the guests that you've had over the past year, kind of thinking over the past year, what's the most important thing? And I'm going to take AI off the table a little bit because I had to say AI because it wouldn't be anything in 2023 without the words AI.
Yeah, right.
But what's the most important thing that you've seen in the space the past year? Change or tech or, really open-ended?
I got to be honest with you. The thing that kind of shocked me the most is our use of language in interactions. I know that might come out of left field, but being more inclusive in our language and being more thoughtful in how we talk. A lot of times we use phrases and words that we don't think about, that they're just part of our vernacular. And one of the guests I had on, I'm going to show you her book, Jackie Ferguson, kind of reminded me in her book, The Inclusive Language Handbook, that the things that we say hurt people and the things are, meaningless, in our minds, but they're meaningful to other people. And I think that was the thing that kind of woke me up during our latest season. And it was really useful. It was really important to hear because I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning that I've been making mistakes this whole time. So that, to me, that was the biggest one. The second one is learning from people who've been on journeys for a very, very long time around who they are and how they present themselves to the world. And so being your authentic self. And I had a couple of people on who really opened my eyes to the fact that when you're LGBTQ plus and you're in the workforce, a lot of times you have to not be able to communicate who you are and what you are. And it's really hurtful. It's really disappointing. I have 2 kids who are LGBTQ, and I don't want them growing up in a world where they have to hide who they are and, what they are from the world. And so I think it's really good that we're starting to have conversations around people being their authentic selves at work and feeling supported by that and not having to hide. Obviously, we're in a political landscape right now where that's a little challenging. And that's where awareness and compassion come into it. And so as a white male, I'm trying to be better through every interaction that I have. I'm trying to be meaningful and trying to be an ally as much as I possibly can.
It's really interesting. I have a brother who is gay and lives in London. The reason he lives in London is he, at the time he met his partner, was in the U.S. working for a large accounting firm, who actually was pretty helpful, but he had to be careful who he was,
right,
particularly in the U.S. And then, of course, they moved to the U.K. because they couldn't get married here at the time. Yep. And so, when people always say, well, does it really affect you? I'm like, you'd be surprised actually who it affects and the realm and the world that it affects. You'd be surprised how many people it affects. And, for me, it was like, okay, now my brother has to move to London. I'm a lifelong Arsenal fan, so actually, it worked out okay for me. But then they set up roots and they live there, and
yep.
and he, I think at some level he stays there because they were the country that accepted him,
yep.
and the community that accepted him over this particular place. But it was interesting for me to watch him have to navigate that, because he, had to be professional at the accounting firm, and that was not okay. I won't say how old I am, but he's not that much younger than me. So it was, so it was not okay. And so we had to navigate that. And, you figure like work's hard enough to be successful,
exactly,
to do the right things, to make your clients happy, to get everyone going, to get the team going. Like the last thing you want to do is have to think about that. Like I wouldn't have been able to do it.
And the world of work continues to change and continues to grow. And hopefully we won't see retrenching and we won't go backwards when it comes to acceptance in the workplace. Heck, we just released a podcast on workplace violence yesterday that I hated to have to release. But a lot of that comes from misunderstandings, miscommunications, and people being treated unfairly or poorly or have that perception. So I hope we grow as a society and grow as a country and as a world so that people don't have to worry about being an authentic self. So
I think the youngest generation that's out there right now, the ones coming out of school, and it's actually, again, my age, my kids' generation, coming out of school, they seem to have less tolerance and more open. And I'm hoping that drives corporate culture a little bit, because if you want the best performers and that's where their mindset's at, I'm very hopeful that that's the case, because, as we spin this back to, the HR tech side and the HR, it's like, what are your high performers doing and what's important to them and their values? Because that's the piece that's going to keep them there and performing high. And if you're flying in the face of that, they will go to somewhere else that values that. And how do you measure that? That's different, right? Because that's not like how many widgets can I make in an hour thing. The culture is hard. And a lot of companies talk about culture, but then don't deliver on it. So
absolutely,
it's going to be hard for them to navigate too. That's a really interesting one, because I think that softer stuff, as we mentioned, joked a little bit early about human resources, it involves humans by default, and it does make it trickier. It's not 100% statistical.
Yep.
So with that in mind, if you looked at that in the last year, what do you see, over the next, kind of putting in the crystal ball, looking ahead for the next 12, 24 months. What do you think is coming, or is it more of the same?
I think there's going to be a tremendous push to try and rationalize the work at home, hybrid work thing. Return to work has been handled very poorly by some organizations and been handled very well by others. In many instances, remote work has kind of become the default from an employee perspective, or at least an expectation for many. And so I think there's going to start to be more regulation, more thought process around it. And that's going to creep into a lot of how we run our HR organizations. I also see us, I know that technology works like this, asking people to be on camera much more than, people say, oh, well, I don't want to be on camera today. Okay, well, that's a choice. But more often than not, you're going to start seeing organizations that do accept remote work to have people be on camera. I think that also is going to change how people meet. Maybe there's going to be less meetings. Maybe there's going to be more get stuff done time than meet time, because people are multitasking too much during meetings today anyways. So hopefully the rationalization comes to, we need to be smarter about the time we put into what is a meeting, what are we trying to achieve by it. The second thing I think that's going to come is around pay transparency and pay equity, where we're going to start to see more states in the United States take on more legislation that requires at least the posting of starting pay ranges for jobs, because that's actually turned out to be a really good thing. And companies are now realizing it's a good thing, and they're being more proactive about it instead of waiting for legislation to push them to do it. And if you're in a state that doesn't have it, but you're surrounded by states that do, that company has to probably do it anyways, because most of the people they're recruiting for or paying or working for or looking for are in those states. So I think transparency is certainly not dead, but it's also going to take on a new life in 2024.
It's interesting on the work from home. So I don't know how public. I wasn't the first, but I've been working remote for 19 years.
Wow. So it's right out of high school then.
Hi. Yeah. I wish. So it's interesting to have watched kind of the cycle of life from, you're the weird one, and how do you make it work, and how difficult it was to work from home. And actually at one role, we're going to give you a go, but we don't think this is going to work.
Right.
To everyone's working at home and people are like, how do you do this?
Right.
To now this kind of where I think it's actually harder, this hybrid thing. It's interesting you mentioned the camera. I'm a big advocate of camera. I'm always on camera. I think it's a little disrespectful to not be on camera without a good reason. You wouldn't put a bag over your head or turn and face the other direction in a face-to-face meeting in general.
I've done that before. Well, I've been told to do that before. So,
well, that's for different reasons, probably.
Well, my mom always said I had a face for a radio. So there you go.
No, we shouldn't have you on the video podcast then. She's going to be really upset with me.
True. That's true.
So I think that is really interesting as companies struggle. The one comment on my personal opinion on that is I think companies have to realize, again, it's human resources.
Right.
And I'm notoriously, believe it or not, introverted. I like my space. I work very well with that, being able to carve the time out. I like, I'm not what people think an introvert sometimes is, but there are people who like the office. So that, and they want to go talk to everybody and go hang out. And so how do you build a culture where you can get the best people possible on board and kind of work with them all?
And I think the flexibility that some companies offer, where there's a place to go, there's times when you need to be there, and that, that ability to be flexible, or to at least have some flexibility, will provide people with, I think, at least enough of both. The ability to go in and to be with people and to, share things together. And then the ability to be home and take care of yourself, your family, the needs that you have, and also the expense of commuting and the wear and tear on your body of commuting. I think those two things they're not opposed. I think they're possible. And so as we grow into what does hybrid look like, what does remote become, I think a lot of times you're going to see companies like Blue Conic. We had their CHRO on our podcast who talked about how they've eliminated their corporate headquarters. They've gone completely remote. Well, that's one way of doing it. What did they also do? They also hired and rented and leased space to be able to have people come and be together. It doesn't need to have the Blue Conic name on the mantle, but they can be together and they can do things that they want to do in common at a place if they need to. And I think that's going to become more popular because, the world has changed. I mean, infectious disease hasn't stopped. The pandemic is not really over. I can tell because 3 out of the 4 coaches on my son's hockey team have some kind of respiratory illness, and I'm the one who doesn't, and I'm feeling like crap right now. So that small sample size kind of leads me to believe we're not out of the woods yet. And remote does help that a lot.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is going to be key, and yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's a great thing that people are dealing with. And how do you do the real estate footprint's a real thing, right? Being an office manager is that's gotten more complicated because your office is now not 1 or 2 locations. It's 50 people somewhere that have to meet and maybe do events, etc.
Exactly.
On the pay transparency side, I mean, how do you see companies getting in front of that best? And I guess the follow-up question to that is, you mentioned the posting of jobs from a pay transparency. That's the external pay transparency. Do you see the internal pay transparency? How far behind do you see that?
Well, so I think let me take the latter first before I deal with the former. So I think that companies need to come up with a pay transparency strategy of communication internally that enables people, not just managers, but employees, to understand we're going to be posting jobs and we're going to be posting them with ranges. And so if your pay range looks like it's more than you're getting, here's why, and here's how we talk about it, and here's what it means to you, and here's what we're going to do about it. That's an important part of being able to have a transparent organization, is being able to deal with areas and scenarios where pay's not secret anymore. I need to now deal with issues of compression. I need to deal with the market movements and how that affects my current staff. That's all part of transparency. You can't hide stuff anymore. That's what transparency means. So I think there's a communication strategy, and there's now going to be a new push to actually have development of a consistent set of processes. And this gets to the former point you made. We're going to have to actually do a lot more market analysis. We're going to have to take data and get more modern sources of data, and surveys will evolve and other technologies will be there to enable us to get what's going on in the marketplace today, so that companies can create better ranges, more modern ranges, and not wait 3 or 4 years to update their ranges, because the market will move. People will see it. It'll be very public. And when I say people, I mean your candidates will see it, your employees will see it, and your managers will see it. And so I think there's going to be almost a kind of a coming out party for compensation plans and compensation policies and compensation programs. So much so that compensation will not be secret anymore. We're going to be sharing things that we never did. We're going to be talking not just about structures, we're going to be talking about plans and policies. And that means that companies need to modernize their compensation systems in order for them to see the light of day. Because you and I both know, we've been in this a long time. We use a lot of compensation speak in our plans and policies. We talk about midpoint progressions. We talk about range penetration. We talk about things that people go, what the hell does that mean? What's compa ratio? I don't know what a compa ratio is. Some people say compa ratio. Some people say comp A ratio. They have no idea, because what we've developed inside of compensation has been this language of our own, this vernacular, and it doesn't mean anything to the external world. So it's not like building a handbook around comp. And that's not going to work, because we're dealing with external parties and we're dealing with internal parties. And we really have to, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, we're dealing with lowest common denominator here, which is there are managers and employees who don't know compensation speak. We have to be very simple about, what do these things mean? And so if we have zones, or if we, compa ratio zones, we now need to call them something else, right? And we need to be very honest and open with how and why we've built these things in the past. So I know that's a long-winded answer to say, we need to be more open about the world of pay. And that's going to cause us a lot of work.
I think it's really interesting you say that, because the other piece that I always tie to that is if you're going to force or require, need managers and et cetera to be more up to speed on everything and how are they going to handle this in a programmatic way, a defensible way. You've got pay equity, you've got all that in there. A third of them, statistically, jokingly, not 75% of statistics are made up on the fly, but from some recent studies, about a third of managers are doing it for the first or second time. Yep. And by the way, even if they've done it several times, they're doing it once, twice at best a year.
Exactly.
And so the expectation that compensation people assume I can send them a PowerPoint with a lot of jargon and methodology and stuff, and they're going to retain that. One, first, are they going to care? Two, are they going to retain it? No. So I think the tech space, from the standpoint of how can we help them, and actually it's a great point, David, in normal English speak, translating from comp to normal human, how can we help them, provide them tools? And then I think the secondary effect, and I'd be curious on your opinion, will be not secondary systems, but like pay for performance, the performance systems, because if you've got a transparent system, you have to somehow show and document and prove that, David's making more in the range because he's a better performer, and Sean's making lower in the range because we're still not sure why we hired him.
Yeah.
That has to be documented in a performance way. Otherwise, you're leaving latitude for people to say, well, I'm not paid the same, and why?
Right.
I think there's some philosophical, really cool upsides like that can come out of this from manager discussions, because obviously if you're getting paid less, it opens the door to some cool discussions. Half of the managers will say good, half of them will be like, oh crap, I don't want to have a discussion.
But I think there's another downfall, or maybe it's a downside, maybe it's an upside, which is that our data, which has typically been crap in HR, has got to get cleaner. We've got to know more about the people that we're paying. We've got to know more about their background. We have to really understand their experience levels, because if we are, to your point, generating a gap in pay, we need to justify that, how and why. And it's not just things that are documented, it's observable. What are the skills this person has? Why are we giving them extra? And this other person doesn't have this skill. Okay, so that's what the gap came from. So we've been trying to get to skill-based pay for years to try and generate, if I take a person and they're a set of these skills, does that equate to what we're paying them? Well, we may not be able to get to that, but at least, when we have skill acquisition and then be able to give that person an increase based on the skill acquisition, document it very clearly and put it in the database, then we may be in a more defensible position about pay and how we pay and how we differentiate. But right now, the data, I think, is our biggest downfall when it comes to all that.
Yeah, and I think the reality of being able to aggregate and put that data into some type of analytical format, right, from multiple systems is going to be hard, because you start thinking about, I've kind of said it all the time, HR has the most disparate systems typically, and you have to really do it right, I think, pull in business items, right? So you can figure out, how much impact this person has to the business versus the other, et cetera. It's a lot to do, like you said. So I think, and then turn it into human language.
Exactly.
Those are great points. So with that in mind, with all that stuff going on, the question I thought would be kind of interesting is if you could solve one HR issue, with a magic wand or what have, and, what would that be?
If I had to solve one HR issue, it would be the pay gap. It's just not fair. It's not necessary. There's no valid reason why we should pay people differently based on who and what they are. It's just horse shit. Pardon my French. Now you have an E for me saying that, or you can bleep me out. But seriously, it frustrates me, it gets me very upset that we pay people differently. We think we get bargains because we pay people less for who they are, and people celebrate that, and it's awful. The pay gap should not exist. There should not be a reason why people doing the exact same job are paid differently because of who they are. And so if I were able to wave my magic wand, it would be to get rid of that now.
That's awesome. I'm with you. I'm always baffled by it. And I hold out this little bit of silver lining of hope that as the world becomes more inclusive and more people get over that, that basically one person's bias becomes another person's victory, because someone will be like, here's what we pay for this work. I don't know what they were doing. I value you at this amount. And then it kind of starts to self-normalize, and that companies, whether they want to be good payers or not, kind of get forced into being good payers. I do believe, back to your point of systems and other stuff and how you push that down and how you do English, I do think well over 90%, I hope it's 99%, of companies want to be good payers in general. Like, I know we can debate a little bit. I think, how do they get there and how do you do that? And I think the one fundamental problem is, for companies, there's only one way to fix it. Everyone's talked about, how do you fix it? Well, you pay the people that are underpaid more. You don't take someone and move them back. We know that's human nature, right? They'll what have you. So it's a money issue that's fundamentally out there. That's a truth. And so I hope I'm with you. I'm baffled by it when we talk about it. Why is this an issue? And I'm still sometimes wake up and look at pay equity and talk about pay equity and be like, I fundamentally struggle that we have this problem, but it's a thing to worry about.
A long time ago, as a compensation practitioner, I once talked to my head of HR and CFO to talk about gaps. And we talked about making a market adjustment budget that was rich enough to be able to solve some of that. And what I got back was, it's a zero-sum game. If we put money into market adjustments, we have to take it out of somewhere else. And I said, we're very profitable. I don't understand why that's necessarily the truth. Well, if we weren't profitable, this would just make our numbers even worse. And blah, blah. And I said, you just made an excuse why you want richer bonuses so that people couldn't get paid more fairly. And I don't like that. Now, as a leader, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's, maybe it's one of those things where you learn a lesson, and now you're in a place where you can do something about it. And hopefully I can.
I think the tools are better and the process has generally been, David, you're now the CHRO. You need to roll out a 4% increase. That's what we've decided, right? Can we start the other way and have the tools and infrastructure and start the process that says, for me to get everyone to midpoint, or to get everyone here and cover pay equity, here's the money and here's the layers. In the past, I do firmly believe there was such a large lift for human resources to go back, comp people, to go back and model out 7, 8, 9 different models of, if I do an even spread of pay, if I create by differentiation and do that was a lot of work, right? And by the way, they have other stuff to do.
Sure.
Will tools allow them to go back and present that? I might be crushed later when people come back with those analytics and say, well, I presented them the way you thought we should present them, and people will do things and they didn't do it anyway. But I do think that's part of it.
An entire podcast can be talked. We talked through that on an entire podcast of, how do you model pay, where you look at the market and you see where people are and you try and get them there, basically on an equal footing. When a job is getting paid this, people who are all over the board, how do you get people to that number? And so I think you're right. I think technology could help that today. But, even when we were doing this back in the late 90s, or in the 90s or the early thousands, I think we had technology. I think Excel helped us get there. Of course, there were compensation tools, but I think it was more the will at that point, not the way. And so I think now, because of the emphasis on pay equity, the emphasis on transparency, I think we're going to kind of be forced to get more closely to that. And as starting rates, because they're being published, as starting rates are published, I think we're starting in the right place. So I think it's more achievable today than it ever was. You're right. Some of it might be systems, but I think more of it's cultural than systems.
And so the last thing is to wrap up, do you have any kind of final thoughts for HR or compensation people as we head into 24?
AI.
I knew you're going to get me at some point. I knew since I took it off the table, you'd come back. That's great.
No, let me qualify that. AI is in every discussion because it's a transformative technology, just in the same way that the internet was in the 90s and early 2000s. And so I think that we're going to get much smarter about the world of artificial intelligence and how it impacts how people work, not replacing people, but enhancing how we work. I think you're replacing people is just, I think that's just banter and bull crap. I think that's, one of those things where they're trying to scare you. And so, let's not use a car because it's going to replace the horse. What are we going to do with all those horses? I think it's going to be something where we're going to see some productivity gains. We're going to see some failures, but we're going to see some productivity gains from it. And I think it's going to reach into the HR world in a very good way and enable us to get to more strategic stuff, just in the same way we thought analytics was when people analytics first came out. But I think there's more to see there. And the second thing I'll say for 2024 is that because it's going to be a political cycle, I think we're going to see a lot more questions about what does the world of HR look like, whether it becomes a Republican administration or a Democrat, say it's Democratic administration. I think that's going to be huge in the U.S. And so the political cycle is going to really heat up around the summertime especially, and that's going to change a lot of things.
Do you think that's going to, cause kind of a slowdown in people evaluating and making changes to their transparency, policy and tech changes?
Well, I don't know about transparency. I think transparency is here to stay anyways, because that's a state issue. That's not really a federal issue. I think that the world of work is going to slow down significantly because some of the things that might happen on a federal level that could change that. Sure. Things like FLSA and overtime and things that or minimum wage and other things that are kind of more global in nature that have federal touch. I think that's what's going to be bigger. So yeah, I do see a slowdown happening, but it's also going to be that everybody holding their breath to see what happens in November.
Well, I really appreciate it, David. I really appreciate the time. It's great to get your insight. Always great to chat with you. So I appreciate it. Thanks again, and we'll chat with everyone else later.
Take care. Thank you.